welcome to the Parents on Pictures podcast. I'm Damien.
And I'm Andy.
And what we do each and every week is we take a film from a popular streaming platform like Netflix, Amazon Prime, or Disney Plus, and we watch it and come in here and talk all sorts about it. So, Andy, what film do we have this episode?
We have Netflix's Extraction. Yeah, very new, very exciting action film.
Went straight to number one. And just before we get into the meat of it, a little bit of what the film's about. So this is straight from Netflix themselves. Tyler Rake is a fearless black market mercenary with nothing to lose when his skills are solicited to rescue the kidnapped son of an imprisoned international crime lord. But in the murky underworld of weapons dealers and drug traffickers, an already deadly mission approaches the impossible, forever altering the lives of Rake and the boy. And that pretty much sums it up in terms of the entire plot.
That's the end of the podcast.
yeah. Show's over. Let's go home. What we're alluding to essentially is that this film has next to no plot whatsoever. Let's face it, this is a vehicle for however long this film is, action piece. And my God, we'll get into it. What an action piece this was. An hour and 56 minutes with about 6 minutes of plot.
But it doesn't need it. And that's the beautiful thing about this film is there is, I think, any more narrative than there was would have ruined the film.
I think it would have killed the flow. It has a pace, and that pace, in spite of the fact that it's an hour and 56 minutes, that pace is quick. You never feel that it kind of slows down and gets bored at any point. It's Absolutely. So fast.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's really good. The action scenes are phenomenal. But let's just talk about the narrative for a moment.
Yeah, let's do that, and then because it should only take a few moments here. So yeah, Andy, do you want to take us away?
Yeah. So the film is set in Bangladesh, but before we get to Bangladesh, we're introduced to some characters in Australia. Chris Hemsworth's character, I don't know what his name is.
As Rake.
Tyler Rake. Yes.
Tyler Rake.
And so we're introduced to him, and he's this very cool, clearly, been in some battle, and I think he's SAS or something, isn't he, or something like that.
He's ex-special forces of some description, yeah, because he's not a mercenary for hire.
Yeah, exactly, and he gets a job come through some like agency that he's involved, some black market agency, where he needs to go and rescue the son of a drug lord in Bangladesh. And he goes to Bangladesh, he fights lots of people, he gets the boy, and that's the film.
Yeah, that is the film. But that's it. So what I like about it is you don't need any more than that. The film knows exactly what it is. This is let's call it, this is a 2-hour set piece. Yep. That's all it is. It is the fact that it's even in Bangladesh is simply a backdrop. They could have literally picked anywhere, because it's two rival drug lords. One of them has kidnapped the other one's son. This is a story that you could have told in any country in the world, and it genuinely wouldn't have mattered, other than the fact that you've got a really beautiful place that's probably not been seen all that much in Western cinema to set this story to. But this story it's old, and the story itself has nothing new to offer by any means. I mean, it's cliched down to every plot development. You've got a mercenary with nothing to live for because his family has died. You've got a drug lord's son who, the son is innocent, even though the drug lord is an absolute what's it. And it's a man who's he's just out for a job.
For sure. And for me, it was a cross between John Wick, the John Wick franchise.
Lots of influence from that, I think.
Man on Fire, Taken. It's like all of those films brought into one, and really successfully brought into one film as well. I think it really worked in that sense.
Absolutely. It's, I think this is where we can certainly see the success of the John Wick franchise, particularly in recent history, having a knock-on effect to other action films. It's like every so often an action film will come along and it will do something so spectacular that's what action films will try and replicate for the next decade to come. Funnily enough, you saw it when The Matrix came out with Keanu Reeves, and now you've seen it again when John Wick's come out with Keanu Reeves. Back in the day, people were trying they were trying wire fu and bullet time and all sorts of crazy things that, let's face it, I don't think has actually ever been successfully done or as successfully done as The Matrix, even though they've tried to copy it.
Max Payne. Did you ever play
See,
Max Payne?
I did. I've actually, Max Payne, when I was younger, I'm not going to say how old, when I was younger, was one of those that I think for a week, I had it basically on loop. It's not a great film, but I must have watched it at least once a day for a week because I was like, I'm loving it. I'm loving it. Now I go back and watch it and I'm like, yeah, it's all right.
Did you ever play the video game?
See, I didn't. I watched it because it was based on a video game property, but I never played the video games.
Right. So the video game was amazing, way better than the film. And you could really play around with that bullet time within the game.
Nice.
Yeah, much like you can in Red Dead Redemption, things like that, where you can tag people and shoot them, kind of similar to that. But it was the first game that really did that. And so, yeah, but, you know, clearly influenced by The Matrix. It was, it was out around that time.
That's fabulous, and this is it. We're seeing the same thing again in the films that we're seeing in terms of action. It's like everybody really likes the very quickly paced, almost surgical precision of the movement in action because of John Wick. It's very surgical in what it does, and we're seeing a similar thing here, but not by any means the same style. John Wick's got a very, very specific martial arts style to it. It's like a Brazilian jiu-jitsu hybrid, whereas this is very much more close quarters combat. So even though it's the same feeling, it's a very different style of combat.
It's military fighting. It's that, you know, he is SAS, a Marine, something like that. And it's that kind of fighting you'd expect from him. It's brutal, it's fast, but it's not technical.
No, and it feels more visceral than John Wick as well. Yeah. John Wick is very stylish and is very clean cut. It's even actually a little bit toned back in its gore. And I did feel that this film did that occasionally, but it felt much, much more visceral in every hit and every gunshot and everything that was happening.
Yeah.
No, I think that's what they were going for.
Right. And it's one of those films you can just lose yourself in for a couple of hours. You're not, you know, this film hasn't changed my life or anything like that.
No, it won't.
You watch it again. I really enjoyed it. And so, you know, in that sense, it was very successful in what it set out to do, just be a way of killing time during lockdown.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's one of those films where I actually started watching it and I got about halfway through and I switched it off. But the reason I switched it off is because I knew that my wife would love this film. Really? And so I was like, right, I got to make a decision here. You know, we can watch this together. And so I told her, look, I've watched half this film. You're going to love it because she loves action as well. I'm very lucky in that way. And I was like, you've got to watch it. Now, no, has she watched it? No, I watched the whole film for this podcast. Right. But that happens a lot. But it's one of those that I'd have, you know, even if you've seen 1,000 action films, I'd still recommend it to you. It's really... I'm reluctant to say easy to watch just based on how visceral and how gruesome it can be with some of it, but it is very digestible. It's like you can sit back and just let it wash over you. You don't have to think about it. You just got to sit and enjoy it.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. I watched it in one go and I couldn't stop watching it. I loved it. I thought it was so good. But again, you know, it's the kind of film where if I had picked it up in 2 parts, it would have been fine. I'm not.
Don't get me wrong. I went back and started it again. So I didn't pick up where I left off. I was enjoying it so much. I was like, no, I'm just going to go back and watch it again. I've got no problem with watching the first half.
Yeah, I think I'll probably go back and watch it again. You know, there were a few parts of it I really enjoyed.
So before we go into like the action, let's cover some of the plot beats then, because there are some really nice touches in this, but again, they are very few and far between. So yeah, you know, it sets up that Rake is a mercenary out for hire. He's got nothing to lose. He only decides to do the job because he basically has a suicide wish. But I suppose it's suicide on the job as opposed to actually taking his own life. And they almost say so much. I think they say something along the lines of you're just waiting, you just spin was it spin the chamber and eventually hope you'll catch a bullet. I think that it was something along those lines. Just as quickly as that sets up the fact that he doesn't really care whether he lives or dies. And when he manages to rescue Ovi, who's the young boy, from the drug lord's henchman, I suppose. Obviously, they have to then go on the run in Bangladesh. But the crime lord is so powerful that he has the police and the military under his control. Again, something we've seen 1,000 times before: corruption in those particular sectors, in government and in the forces, because of a drug lord and money. It's nothing new. You're not going to see anything new. In fact, I think even was it the Expendables tried to do that in the very first one. The drug lords owned all of the military, blah blah blah, and there's a point where there is actually a bit of a breather, and they're being picked up by a friend of Rake's, and they're able to get to essentially a safe house. And that just before they get there, before they get picked up, they have a little heart to heart whilst they're waiting to be picked up. And that's when you find out that I think it was Rake's family drowned. And then that's kind of all the storytelling that they needed for that moment.
Yeah. So his son died, and then he doesn't know where his wife is, and it's that
because he wasn't there. He's the absent military father.
Yeah.
Which was
I guess part of it, he feels like he owes something to this boy to protect him, because he couldn't protect his own son. He feels a level of honor or something. I'm not sure.
It's probably father's guilt.
Yeah, perhaps.
Which is quite common. I feel that, not to that extent, but yeah, parental, being a parent brings a certain level of guilt, because you're making decisions and you never know whether it's the right one. And in this case, you find out that he had done his tours, but he volunteered to go on that tour when his son died. So he was carrying a tremendous amount of guilt with him, because he knew that he could have been there if he hadn't have volunteered, because he didn't have to go away.
So there's that element to the story. Now, you could take that whole element of the story out of it, and you've still got the same film.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. and this is it. The story. But what I like about it is the fact that they know that as well. The people making this film understand that, so they don't dwell on it.
Right. And so we've got a film here that's produced by the Russo brothers, famous for the Avengers franchise and various other bits and pieces. So we know we're going to get, even before we watch it, we're going to get quality action scenes here, because we've seen it before. We know that they love these big budget action films. And it's directed by a guy called Sam Hargrave, and he is a very well-established stuntman. So, these two people working together were never going to produce anything short of brilliant.
Exactly the same as Wick. Two stuntmen turned directors, and they've made one of the best action films you've seen in a long time.
Yeah, and even so, in terms of cinematography, I forget the guy's name, Newton Seal. This guy's been on he was the cinematographer for The Usual Suspects. This guy is a big deal. He's been in the game a long time. He knows what looks good. And what's interesting is, so we can talk about this in a moment, but that I think it's 11-minute fight.
It sounds like 11 or 12 minutes, just uncut and chase sequence, essentially.
In terms of cinematography, you need someone who really knows what they're doing, someone who's got the experience to pull that off. We saw it in Sam Mendes'
Children and Men. Children of Men. Excuse me, that's not Sam Mendes, but I know the one you're talking about now. But yeah, Children of Men was when I first saw that very long uncut sequence, and I was like, "Oh, that's good."
Yeah,
other people.
But in terms of complex action sequences, though, we're looking at Spectre.
Yeah,
right. That was amazing. This really, and we know that it's not unedited. We're led to believe it's unedited, but we know it's not. We can work out where the cuts are, but it's fab, and it's really complex to put a scene like that together. And I think that in Extraction, they do that scene to an even better degree than Spectre, than Children of Men, or anything like this, because the action sequence is so fast
Yes.
that,
So quick.
and and it's that for me was the most exhausting part of the film. I came out of that just like, whoa,
Yeah.
that was mental. And it wasn't until afterwards I sort of stopped and went, that was all one shot. And I Netflix rewound it and all that. I'd look like that really was one shot. That's
All one
amazing.
shot. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're right. I think it is a little exhausting. But when you consider not just the length, but what they do in those 11 and 12
Yeah.
minutes, because you've got an on foot chase and
Yeah.
fights whilst they're on foot, and then being chucked off buildings, and
Run
then
over.
going into a car chase,
Yeah.
having just come out of a car chase, into a foot chase, into another truck car chase. And this is all one big continuous shot.
Yeah.
Yes, there are cuts. If you know what you're looking for, you can spot some of them. I don't think I spotted all of them, but there were some areas where I was like, okay, cool. So that was probably a cut.
Yeah.
And obviously where the camera's going in and out of cars and around cars, and where it's like, there's no way that could be. Now, I could be proven wrong. They may have done that, but there are certain things where I'm like, that probably wasn't physically possible.
Right.
But unless you're looking for it, you wouldn't notice.
Not at all. And that's part of the beauty of it. And I think unless you're looking for it, you're not, unless you're someone who's going to sit there and pick apart films like we do, you're not going to pick up on it. And it just feels like a fluid scene, but really fluid. And it takes you on that journey of action along with Chris Hemsworth, who is just brilliant in the whole film, but in that sequence especially. And I think it just goes to prove, not that he's a great actor, because we're not, but it's not great acting, but it's absolutely amazing physicality.
Yeah.
He is an athlete in terms of the amount of work that must have gone into that.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I'm trying to say, Les, is I completely agree. I've got to disagree with you at some point. However, you're right in the sense that it's not great acting. But again, the people who are making this, and probably Chris Hemsworth as well, they all know what people are watching.
Yeah.
And instead of trying to make the film something it's not, and then falling into the pitfalls of slowing the film down, they're like, no, they 100% know what they're making. They know that this is essentially one big, long action sequence set in a beautiful backdrop and a beautiful landscape. And they don't try and make it more than that, because you see action films from time to time that try and grasp at more than what they are, and it gets either incredibly trite and cliched, or it becomes very boring and slowed down when you don't need to slow the pace down for any reason other than the fact that somebody wants to try and make this more than just an action film. It's like, no, if you are an action film, be an action film. And that's exactly what this film does.
Do you ever remember the film The Last Action Hero with
yes. Yeah.
That's exactly the same. I mean, and that was a parody of action films from the 90s and stuff. But that's that principle, isn't it? You are an action film, commit to it. Just go for it.
Be an action film.
Don't try, we're not looking for hybrid genres. We're not looking for any of this. What we're looking for is an action film that is committing to be an action film.
And boy, do they commit. Boy, do they commit.
Sure. Absolutely. And we see with the Expendables where they brought together all these action heroes and they created an action film. But I feel like this is so much more successful than that.
Well, for starters, the action's better. The choreography in this is phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, the Expendables is gimmicky. That's that's the appeal of that film. Whereas Extraction is just quality, and it really is a quality action film.
Yeah, it's interesting that we keep going back to the Expendables, because I think the Expendables franchise was one that had big problems, because the first one was it was rated R, it was gritty, it was quite intense with what it was trying to do, but it was that classic of it was trying to be more than an action film. They were trying to weave in this subplot between the main characters and the woman who's over there. They want to try and rescue her, but she doesn't want to be rescued because she's one for the people. It's like, okay, cool, whatever. And then they went for masses of blood and violence, albeit some of it CGI. And then in the second film, it was so bad that it was funny,
Yeah.
but I think that that was intentional because it was very different to the first one. I think it's because they didn't really know what to do with the characters that they had. It was just the appeal of, hey, look at all these people you used to remember and go and watch. Whereas this is like, yeah, we're not going to do anything deep because we know that that's not what we're making.
Absolutely.
We are, however, going to commit to the best quality of action that we can give you. And other than John Wick, I am struggling to think of an action film that provides such well choreographed action in recent years.
And I think so much of that goes just to show how influential Netflix is now in terms of producing this quality of film. When we used to get Netflix originals, you know, in the early days of Netflix, when they started branching out to Netflix originals, they were pumping huge amounts of money into very mediocre productions.
Yeah.
Yeah, Netflix, they're unrivaled. You know, you've got your Amazon Prime and what have you, and you know, you get your Amazon originals and that. They don't touch the sides of what Netflix can do. And I can't remember what the budget was for this. It was under 100 million though. Where
Yeah,
are
you
we?
see, Netflix are very cagey about their numbers, aren't they?
It says here budget $65 million.
Okay.
You know, very modest budget for a film that is wildly successful. And, you
Yeah.
know, went straight to number one. It's been on the top 10 for the last 2 weeks since it's been released. This is a good quality film. And I just hope that Netflix start putting more money into this kind of quality film. And I just...
Well, it is reported, according to Netflix, it is their most successful film to date
Good.
in terms of views, and in terms of how quickly those views were racked up. Now, some of that, and this is a little bit, that's going to be down to Netflix's new policy on what they count as a view, because there was a little bit of controversy in the media a few weeks back where Netflix, if somebody watches something, I think it's for as little as 20 seconds, they count that as a view.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, so I don't know how that's exaggerated the numbers for Extraction. However, it must have done well enough for them because they've already greenlit a sequel.
Which I was going to talk to you about that at some point. How do you think they're going to do the sequel?
No idea, but they've left it open, and if you pay close attention to the ending, then you can see how there's a sequel. But it might not be. They may do a prequel like Black Widow.
Do you want to talk about this? As in, do you want to talk about the ending or not?
I was going to say there's a couple other bits that I want to talk about before we get to the ending, because again, the plot is very minimal. So one thing I wanted to talk about in terms of characters themselves was David Harbour. David Harbour doing Stranger Things, and he's done a couple other things for Netflix as well. So it's no big surprise to see someone like David Harbour in this film. But, and spoiler alert, obviously we spoil pretty much everything we talk about, so switch off now. But David Harbour is the character. His character's name is Gasper, and he's an old friend of Chris Hemsworth in the film. And he goes to the safe house, and it's all really chummy, pally. But as it turns out, his character is the one that tries to betray him for the $10 million reward on the young boy's life. And I thought that casting was brilliant, because when you see David Harbour on film, especially in recent years due to Stranger Things, you don't expect him to be the bad guy, and he's not the bad guy as such.
And
but
he was
always a guy you see and trust.
Yeah, and that I think that was an excellent casting, because you do trust him. He's got a face you want to trust, hasn't he?
Yeah.
He's got, you know,
he's
especially
your dad or he's your uncle. You know, you trust him, you like him.
So for him to betray you I was actually really shocked by that.
Yeah.
And you know, maybe I'm just being naive. Maybe other people watching it would have seen that coming a mile off, but I didn't.
No.
And I was disappointed.
It's like, I don't want David Harbour to betray him. I want him to remain the good guy.
This is not how I wanted this to end.
No, exactly. But it stuck in my head as well. So I thought that was a brilliant moment. But again, they don't have a lot of plot to tell. So they've set up their friendship and the betrayal all in 5 minutes. Yeah. But they did it so well, and the casting was so on point that it still had that small emotional impact. And that's what they're after. It's like, cool, that's what we'll do. We'll do it through casting and through a little bit of storytelling and nothing more. And by God, was David Harbour the right person for that?
Yeah, absolutely. He fit like a glove. It was
Yeah.
perfect.
But what
Yeah.
I liked as well was the fact that it wasn't Rake's. Rake didn't kill him. It was
Not well,
Ovi.
yeah. So
And
that was
again,
interesting. I think he would have done.
yeah, I think he would have done as well. Had he
But
pushed him, I think he would have
yeah,
tried to stop him. But as it turns out, Gasper actually got he managed to overpower
yeah,
Chris Hemsworth, which
yeah.
I was like, I'm not sure. Do I believe that? Like, actually, Harbour is a big guy.
Hmm.
But does he have the training? Does he have the muscle? I'm not sure I would have believed that, but the way they did it made it
It
believable.
works, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. Let's talk about the other assassin, the Bangladeshi assassin. Whilst all of this is happening, so there's like a kind of a twist in the plot whereby the drug lord whose son has been kidnapped doesn't want to pay the full fee to the agency that Chris Hemsworth works for.
He can't afford it, can he? Because they've frozen his accounts.
So, and he's in prison.
Yeah.
And so what he's got a henchman of sorts who works for him, who is going to basically kidnap the boy from Chris Hemsworth and then take him back so that they don't have to pay the agency the full fee for collecting the boy. So this guy was fab. Like, I loved him. And
I
his
thought he was
story,
brilliant.
yeah, his story was great as well, because he had a story of a family at home and all that we see.
Well, you learn that the drug lord that hires him, because from what you gather from what little story is told, is that he's been a friend of his. Well, friend is a very loose term. He has been working for him for many, many years. And he actually threatens his family's life. It's like, if you don't get my son, I will kill yours. And so that's, he's pushed into doing it. And the actor is Randeep Hooda, and he plays Saju. Yeah, Randeep Hooda,
and
he plays Saju.
Was just brilliant. Everything from the way he looked to the way he acted. There's a part where, do you remember the bit on the boat where he goes in and he basically just takes out a 4-man team on this boat, and just, it's just done so well. One of my favorite computer games is Hitman.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And for me, that was like a scene from Hitman. It was just brilliant. It was so good.
And it's his speed as well, because not only does he take out the team on the boat, but then he manages to get off the boat and take out the sniper that's in the woods that's looking over the boat, and he does it all incredibly quickly. And then he tracks down Rake and Ovi, where they have their first kind of like altercation in the forest or woods there.
Yeah.
And it's so expertly done. But it's like you've got Rake, who is special forces, and you've got Saju, who is special forces, and when they properly meet during that 12-minute sequence, they are genuinely equals, because neither one of them comes out of that good. They're all completely bashed up, and they have to hit each other with vehicles to stop each other, which again was just brilliant. But they are equals in every sense of the word.
Yeah, absolutely. Just the casting, I think, is
phenomenal,
really well,
phenomenal. And I did for a short spell of time feel sorry for Saju, the character, but then. And again, this is probably the lack of storytelling that is helping. But then you've got to remember that, well, actually, he is working with this drug lord, and he has probably done some really, really horrible things.
Well, talking about the horrible things the drug lords did, there's that scene where that henchman for the drug lord who has kidnapped the son in the first place, one of his henchmen chucks that boy off the building.
Yeah, straight away, literally just picks him.
See that coming?
What? 8, 9, maybe 10.
Honestly,
really young.
That for me was just. I sat there, it's like, whoa! You just threw him off a building.
I couldn't believe it. That for me, that was quite shocking. Yeah. Literally, just picks him up, throws him off. Is that right? Okay, so who's next, or are you going to tell me what I want to know?
Yeah, exactly.
I was like, bloody hell!
And the young lad with the scar on his face,
Yeah.
um, you know, I, without trying to sound too much like a cliche, he's gonna go places. I'm expecting to see him in other things now.
Yeah. I would hope so too, because he did a great job with what he was given.
Yeah, he was great, young lad, and very small part, but really owned that part.
Yeah. It was excellent. And it actually brings me on to a point that I was thinking through the film. It's like, in certain parts of this film, you can tell, and I know why they do it, because you have to be rooting for the good guys, but you can tell that they were trying desperately to walk a political line. And what I mean by that is that the bad guys are killing kids, and the good guys, they actually, the children are hired because of the character with the scar is given a job and a gun, as they
Mhm.
say. He and the children are hired to go after Rake, and Rake does everything in his power not to kill them, even though they're coming after him with knives and machetes and guns. But when it comes to the bad guys, they've got no problem whatsoever with killing children. And so the portrayal of Western culture and anything that's not Western actually caused a little bit of a problem for me in this film.
Well, it did for lots of people, Damien. This is one of the big. There are a couple of things where this film's caused some pretty major controversy. So it's been called. We see it in films all the time. The idea of the white savior,
Mm.
the white man who comes into a foreign land and can basically dominate anybody within that land, take them over, do what he needs to do, and save them from whatever issue they have. And that's something that Hollywood has been doing for decades, really long time, forever, in fact. And painting the people outside of that, these non-white people, as almost savages, as less qualified, as less skilled, as less humane than this white savior role. So it has come under a lot of scrutiny there. That wasn't just you picking up on that. That was a major issue for lots of people.
No, I didn't realize that, but I'm glad. In a way, I'm glad that people were outraged by that, because I think in the day and age that we live in, they should be outraged by that.
I agree.
But at the same time, I'm not naive enough to think that this type of thing doesn't happen. What I didn't like was the fact that, as you pointed out, I again, this is beyond me. The whole white savior thing. It's like, is it really okay to portray that in modern cinema and films these
Right.
days?
And so the other thing that's been particularly, and there's been lots of press around this, is the use of the yellow filter on basically the whole film. As soon as they're in Bangladesh, they use a yellow filter. And it isn't until you go back and you watch it again, you go, oh God, why have they done that? And um, you know, it, there are moments of it where that yellow filter is so unnecessary. And it basically, the yellow doesn't have connotations of particularly nice things, especially not the kind of yellow they're using. It's kind of urine soaked
Very
yellow.
sickly.
Yeah, and it's not a positive connotation. You don't look at that and go, oh, that looks nice. You look at it, it looks sandy, it looks dirty. And so it's that painting of this Bangladeshi environment. I think it's Dhaka. Is it? Oh,
Dakar, yeah.
It is Dhaka.
I think it's
This
Dakar.
a thriving suburban city. This is somewhere where, when you see actual pictures of it, this is a metropolis.
Yeah.
And the film has presented it in such a way that, they've represented it as
Well, it feels like a third world country.
yes, very much so. And I feel like all of the actors who are not Chris Hemsworth are basically made out to be third world savages, and it's so far from real life, and it buys into all sorts of stereotypes that we've seen time and time again. And so for me, that was a major gripe. And actually, being naive and stupid, when I first watched it, it wasn't a major issue for me. But having watched bits of it back since then, it does make me feel quite uneasy. And I really want to watch this film again. I loved it. It was brilliant. But there is something niggling in the back of my mind where I go, that was a poor decision.
Yeah.
They didn't.
I did see. I didn't do any reading behind it in that sense, like you did, but I can certainly see why this would be an issue. I think more so these days, people who watch films, and I'm talking about, you know, your average Joe, your critics, whatever, doesn't matter. I think people who watch films these days are a lot more aware of what they're consuming,
Yeah.
and so these types of things start to stick out, and you can't. I think "get away" is the wrong word, because I don't think a lot of the time that, you know, filmmakers, it not in a film like this anyway, would be going out of their way to offend people. But you cannot rely on the stereotypes that you could rely upon, you know, 20 years ago, because it's just not acceptable today.
Not at all. And you know, we as a society, we're better than that. You know,
Yeah.
we've come so far that taking a step back in that sense is such a shame. And it is just relying on lazy stereotypes. That is simply all it is. And we've spoken before about things like the Bechdel test, where you know we have this, you know, idea of representation of women. Films are getting better at that, and we're a million miles away from being perfect, but we're certainly making big strides. And what we don't see is films taking us backwards now in terms of representation of women. So I don't understand why, you know, representation of Eastern ethnicities, why all of a sudden that's acceptable.
Yeah. I mean, especially when you think about something I said at the beginning, was that this film's story is so old that you could literally have picked any backdrop, any situation, any scenario you want to think of, but this is the one that they went with, and which left itself wide open to stereotype. Because let's face it, the thing that you should be focusing on is the action, because it's so good. So I mean, you could have made this a sci-fi, and I think because of the action, people will still have seen this in space.
Mhm.
But they decided to go, don't get me wrong, to a beautiful country,
Yeah.
but then they make it look like this. It's like
Mhm.
they're just relying on something that you shouldn't be relying on anymore. Those lazy stereotypes.
And that is a shame. And when I was watching the film for the first, you know, the first time round, I didn't buy into any of it. As in, it didn't affect my viewing of the film. It was only afterwards when I read about these things, I kind of looked back and went, "Oh, yeah, that's not great."
Yeah. No, you know, whilst it did stick out to me, it must have been a passing thought again until the film had finished. And then, as I tend to do, is I like to think a little bit about the film that I've just watched, and it stuck out to me. It's like, okay, so the, you know, the good guys never kill kids, but the bad guys do. It's, you know, it's dirty, dingy, horrible. It's like it's it's like this film belongs in the 80s,
Yeah,
but with 2020 action sequences.
yeah,
If
yeah,
this had come out in the 80s, people would have lost their minds.
yeah.
Made
Oh,
a
yeah,
$1 billion
yeah.
because of the action alone, and nobody would have cared about the stereotypes.
Do you think, just going back to the success of this film, you're saying it's one of Netflix's most successful films. Do you think some of that success has to do with the fact that currently in lockdown and people have nothing better to do and they're looking for a sense of escapism?
I think there's a lot to do with that. I also think that because you've got the Russos and Hemsworth attached to it, that's given it a lot of publicity.
Right.
Otherwise, I think that this could very easily have been one of those films that Netflix kind of quietly pushes onto its streaming platform and doesn't really give it any attention, because they have a nasty habit of doing that, and sometimes for some really good films.
But like you said it several times, the idea that the story has been done time and time again. So I don't, you know, I know why this film is so successful in terms of it is a good film. The action sequences are exceptional. Chris Hemsworth is amazing. God, any man who watches this and doesn't want to be Chris Hemsworth, I salute you, right?
Yeah.
But
I mean,
it's
I've been studying martial arts for 18 years. I look at this and I go, damn, I've got some work to do.
yeah, man, he's great. But it's in terms of it's never going to win an Oscar or anything. Do you know what I say that? But actually, perhaps it could, because the
Really?
Oscars.
Oh, what do you
Well,
reckon?
yeah, for cinematography.
Ah, fair enough. Yep.
Although actually, I think probably not, because of all of the stuff around the use of filters after in the editing. I think that perhaps it would cause
It
much
would
con-
certainly hurt its chances.
yeah. But in terms of the actual quality of the cinematography, I think it's Oscar worthy. I really do. Um, but I just can't see this film ever winning an Oscar, because
No.
it's just kind of nonsense, but it's brilliant nonsense.
Yeah, and it's Yeah, I think we're going to go around in circles here. So we may as well kind of like skip to the end, and unless we've got something else to say. But in terms of the fact that it's nonsense, yeah, it's a film that knows what it is, and it'll just play up to that. But it'll do it remarkably well. The action is. I mean, I could watch this film a couple of dozen times just based on watching the action sequences alone. Because as a martial artist myself, I love that kind of thing. Is that I'll go through it and I'll be like, yeah, that's possible. That's possible. That probably not so much. But this is one of these where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to really watch this because it's so quick, and to have even a choreographed fight to the speed in which they're pulling this choreography off, they have to know exactly what they're doing. Because, for instance, things like the knives that they're using, they're probably plastic knives, so they're safety weapons. But the problem with a plastic knife is that if you get the end of that, it's still sharp and it will go through you. It won't cut you if you use the blade, but if you use the pointy end, that's still going to go straight through you if you stab somebody with it. And so the speed that they're doing this at, and the timing that these actors have got takes a remarkable amount of physicality and training and practice to pull this off. It's so quick. And at no point, because you do see it occasionally, at no point did I notice, it may have happened, but I didn't notice it, where they sped the camera up to make it look quicker than it was. I didn't notice it ever. So I
No.
can only imagine that this was just 100% them,
Mhm.
shot after shot. Because what people will attempt to do, what directors and cinematographers will attempt to do, is one of two things. If they've got actors that can't fight, either speed up the camera so it looks better than it is, but it always looks bad, or they'll do quick cuts because they have to cut away because they make a mistake and they can only film like 2 or 3 moves at once. But you've got a prolonged sequence of 12 minutes, and most of that is action, hand to hand combat,
And so
and
much,
you've got nothing being sped up.
and it's wide shots as well. So
Yes.
we're not getting, so think, for instance, the Bourne trilogy, or
All
the,
close quarters, all
yeah,
close shots,
and the editing
very quick.
so quick. Whereas this, we're getting lots of wide shots, close up, wide shot, close up, wide shot. And those wide shots, you can see that they're doing it for real. They're not
Yeah.
slowing any of this down.
It's exactly what they did in John Wick, isn't it? Because again, if you've got actors that can fight, just pull the camera back,
Mhm.
point, and let them do their thing. And that's exactly what they're doing here.
Yeah.
Because they can fight. Clearly, it's brilliant.
Before we do wrap this up, can we just go to something we mentioned earlier about, you said that they have greenlight the sequel
Yes.
or
Yeah.
prequel or something else. How does that work? Because spoiler alert, he dies at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is it. So if you go to the end, yeah, they're on the bridge again. The bridge sequence, phenomenal action
Mhm.
piece, and again, just a lot of gunplay there. There's very little close quarters combat. It's all gunplay.
Oh, something
Phenomenal
we need to
pieces.
mention is that beautiful sequence with the snipers.
Oh yeah, the
Oh,
tension. Oh my god. So
mm.
yeah, no, you go for it. I've spoken enough. You go for that.
Well, just that reminded me of Hitman so much. That the sniper sequence on the bridge, I really loved it. And you've got the kind of the general of the army, and he's got this really clear view of the bridge and the people on the bridge. You've got Chris Hemsworth and his agency trying to take the boy away, and this, this colonel, this whoever he is, commander, chief, whatever, he's looking at the bridge and he's shooting at the bridge and he's just taking them out. He's just cherry picking these people off. And this woman who works for the agency works out
She's
where he is,
badass.
and she just takes the most beautiful shot and just stops him in his stride. It's wonderful,
It's
wonderful.
so well done, and the tension is like, okay, again, it's an action. I know what's going to happen here, and it happens, and I'm still cheering and loving
I
it
know,
as it's happening.
I know. And what does that say about us, though, as an audience? We're such a passive audience because we know exactly what's coming next, and yet we still revel in it. What is that all
But I
about?
think that's because the whole of the film up to this point, even though we know what's going to happen, it's been done so well that at no point do I resent the film for doing something predictable. Because I'll watch an action film and the action is average at best. And when it gets to the end, I'm like, okay, can we wrap this up, please? Yeah, you're going to kill the bad guy. I don't care. Let's
Yeah.
just, and please, for the love of God, don't make a sequel. But this, because it's such, and unfortunately, sequels usually get made out of those films. But because it's been done so well,
Mhm.
at no point did I ever resent it for being predictable, which it was.
Yeah, but I'm exactly the same. Yeah. Right.
So
Shall we?
yeah, so they're on the bridge. The
Yeah.
sniper gets taken out. You think everything's everything's hunky dory. Chris Hemsworth turns because he's about halfway across the bridge at this point, and actually, something we didn't mention was that Chris Hemsworth and Saju, Rake and Saju, they actually team up in the end.
Mhm.
Saju agrees to get Ovi back to his family because they've cut the whole city's been cut off and all the bridges, and because Hemsworth understands that Saju, whilst he's trying to get Ovi back, it's actually to get him back for his father because he doesn't want to pay. It's not to kill him.
Mhm.
And Chris Hemsworth or Rake decides, you know what? I lost my son. Yes, you're not going to pay us. I'm not going to get my money, but there's no way I'm going to let this boy die. And the boy's best chance of success is to go with you whilst I distract everybody. And so they team up in the end, which is, again, phenomenal. Because just to watch them two working was just an absolute joy.
Yeah.
And Saju gets shot by the sniper, wasn't it? That's how you first find out about him. Yeah, the sniper takes out Saju. Ovi manages to get to the agency, which are on the other side of the bridge, and Hemsworth is halfway across the bridge. The sniper gets taken out. Hemsworth starts to walk towards the agency's helicopter so that he can get lifted away. And then the boy with the scar on his face shoots him through the neck whilst he's got his back turned.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the good guys shoot at the boy, but they miss every time. Even though she's a crack sniper, he doesn't even take a shot, I don't think.
This is the thing, because they haven't missed a shot the whole film.
I'm like, I get it. He's a kid. You're the good guys. You're not going to kill kids, but for the love of God, this is war.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Not that we're condoning children or killing children.
No. Absolutely. I've got nothing more to add to that. We never condone that. Never condone. I was going to say, but this is a film, and in reality, that kid would get it.
Right.
Anyway, Hemsworth falls off the bridge because he knows he can't make it back. He's got a bullet in his neck, and he doesn't resurface.
Now, is this going to be
dead?
Is this going to be a Skyfall moment where all of a sudden he washes up in some beach somewhere where he's lying low for a little while and then he goes on another mission? Are we going
Maybe. But if you go right to the end, there's a flash forward of 8 months. Ovi's back at home and he's at school and he's on the diving board and he dives off and he goes underneath and he tries to sit on the ground. On the ground of the pool, the bottom of the pool, much like Hemsworth does at the beginning of the film, where he just leaps off of a what is it? It's not really a mountain. What would you call it? It's just a cliff edge. Yeah, leaps off a cliff edge into some water and sits on the bottom of the water, on the bottom of the ocean there for a bit. But when Ovi resurfaces, he looks to his left, and there is a silhouette of a man, very much like Hemsworth, and then boom. Cut to black credits.
Yeah.
It's like, and it's not clear. It's like, is that Hemsworth? Is it someone else?
No.
So they have left it open if you want to interpret it that way.
Something else, again, I've completely forgotten about until we're talking about now. The bit at the very end where the woman who runs the agency is the drug dealer who kidnapped the boy and who basically you remember it
I
now.
just remembered. Right. I was like, that was a brilliant bit.
Yeah. So the woman who runs the agency is sorry, I'll take it back. The drug dealer who kidnapped the boy in the first place is in a hotel somewhere, and it's a black tie event, and he goes into the toilets and there is, his bodyguards are all outside protecting him, this, that, and the other. And he stood at the urinal, and this woman in this beautiful dress walks up, and you realize it's the woman from the agency. And she just looks across at him and shoots him straight in the head. And it's wonderful.
It's beautiful. Again, we've seen it 100 times before. They're getting their revenge for killing their best guy. He's going to get it. But it was just so good.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I kind of feel like wrapping up on this is pointless because would I recommend this film? Absolutely.
Would I recommend this film? Yes.
Right.
it has its flaws.
It
It
does.
does rely on stereotypes. It has no big plots. So if you, and again, I always try and recommend films based on other films of the same genre. This is a very clear-cut action piece, but I
Mhm.
think it's elevated action in the sense that it's so well done that for a time I can compartmentalize the issues I've got with it and just sit back and watch it for what it is, an action piece. So on that respect, if you like your action films, flipping watch this.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel exactly the same way. It is a shame that they had to rely on these lazy stereotypes. It is a shame that they brought in that yellow filter. But, you know, if you can remove those things from the film and you remove it from your mind when you're watching it, this is an exceptional action film. Really well done to Netflix, the Russo brothers, and Chris
Is
Hemsworth.
it Hargreave, the director?
Yeah, just the whole thing is really well done.
Awesome. Right. Well, there you go. Eventually, Andy, we are going to have to not recommend something. I think that's what, 5 clear episodes, and we've recommended them all.
5 clear episodes. We've recommended all the films. We need to find something that's a bit more challenging for us to watch, I think.
Absolutely. And, you know, we're open to suggestions. So if you've got anything that you'd like us to review, then by all means, just give us a shout.
There was talk a while ago of some Studio Ghibli films. Is that how you say it?
Yes.
Studio Ghibli?
Yeah, Studio Ghibli. So we've got 2 other gents who from time to time would like to come on here and guest with us, and we've wholeheartedly said yes because they're fantastic guys, and they're much more into your independent cinema or your international cinema, and we thought it'd be a really nice change of flavor to bring them on every so often. And when they come on, they're going to pick the film that we review, I think, and so it should really mix things up here as well.
I think
And
so.
there was talk of Studio Ghibli when they came on.
Yeah, I'm such a sucker for a mainstream film. That's my problem. And
Same here. Yeah.
so maybe we need to find something. So if you do have any suggestions, we are on Facebook and on Instagram and Twitter and YouTube. And so just let us know, drop us a message and just let us know what you fancy, because, you know, we want to watch films that are out of our comfort zone. We're just picking films that are in our comfort.
So if anybody doesn't know how this works, we actually take it in terms to pick a film. And as it turns out, we're picking films that, whilst not similar, still very much mainstream at the moment.
Yeah. So let us know. It would be so nice to have a contribution from a listener and someone who. Yeah.
And again, thank you to everybody who is listening. We really appreciate that. And if you want to do us a big favor, then what helps us get seen is to chuck us a recommend or what have you on iTunes, Spotify, all that kind of jazz, and Facebook as well, because we're on there and they've got a little recommend button. So if you enjoy it, feel free to, chuck us a recommend, because it helps us get seen from the big boys.
Absolutely. If you fancy sharing what you like, or even just commenting on anything we're posting or anything like that, is really helpful. On the Facebook page especially, we're active just posting some very random
film trailers, little reviews, comments, loads of stuff.
Get on there and just give us some feedback. It'd be great to hear from you.
Much appreciated. Okay, this has been an MDM and RA production, or joint production. More about that in the future. But other than that, thank you very much. Say bye now.
Ciao.